This is Barbados Rum, the case for a GI. A perspective on why some believe Barbados needs a geographical indication for its rum.
We had the absurdity that we would send our Barbados raw sugar to the UK to be refined in the UK into branded granulated sugar to be re-imported to the Barbados shelf.
Master distiller and blender for Square Factory, Richard Seal, reports that they've been waiting for the Barbados Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, better known as CIPO, to register Barbados rum through the geographical indication.
So everything that has been presented against it has been sort of false propaganda. That's the only way I can really describe it. So one of the ways that has been spun very negatively, and it's completely false, is the notion that a registration could close distilleries or prevent certain exports or prevent bulk sale of Barbados rum. This is all fantasy. I mean, just let's get context here. There's an act in Barbados called the Geographical Indications Act, which basically says come and register a GI with CIPO. It does not send agents of CIPO around the island to close and police people. I mean, this is pure fantasy. So there's this fantasy that's created that you wouldn't be able to sell bulk rum. This is not true. So that is, of course, one of the tools. And I mean, it's a bit sad because even if it were true, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I think the best way for me to give you the context of that, if you take, for example, Scotch whiskey, and so the vast majority of whiskey being distilled in Scotland is sold as compliant, Scotch whiskey. Very little bulk whiskey leaves Scotland to become something other than Scotch whiskey. And the reason for that is very simple, is because that's the single best thing you can do. If I've distilled some whiskey, the most valuable thing I can do with that whiskey is to sell it as Scotch whiskey. And so one of the things you dream with the GI is that when people distill rum in Barbados, that the most valuable thing they can do, the best economic outcome for that, is to make the complete product in Barbados, i.e. sell it as Barbados Rum certified geographical indication. So a GI cannot prohibit or stop anybody producing rum in bulk and exporting in bulk. But you're hoping that it creates such a value in the future on Barbados rum, bottled in Barbados, authentic, carrying the certified geographical indication label, that's what you want to do. That is your best choice, not to sell it to some bulk, third-party brand outside. So, as you say, it's a myth to say it's going to prohibit it, but it's a genuine objective to hope that the day comes that every single drop of Barbados rum produced in the island is bottled in the island, and the maximum value. I mean, let's take a step back and look at, for example, the sugar industry. So the sugar industry spent its entire, to what life it has left, making raw sugar. And raw sugar was then processed abroad, was branded abroad or refined abroad. I mean, we had the absurdity that we would send our Barbados raw sugar to the UK to be refined in the UK into branded granulated sugar to be re-imported to the Barbados shelf. It's madness. And so you imagine someone had the foresight, well, we wouldn't have any legislation, to create a genuine Barbados sugar packaged in the island, branded in the island, refined in the island. You wouldn't prohibit the export of bulk sugar, but you would hope that would have planted the seed to the growing of a brand of sugar that was viable. And that's what you're trying to achieve. You're trying to say, well, I've got an industry here, and it's, as I say, we have a colonial vestige, and you see it across the board. I mean, if you go and look at Ghana with its cocoa, it ships cocoa, it doesn't make chocolate. I mean, this is pervasive through the colonial world, where you have your agricultural product, but the value is exploited abroad. And, if you look within the European Union, there's about, I think about a couple of thousand registered GIs. They are the experts of it. There's, I think 3 GIs from the Anglophone Caribbean. I mean, this is a tragedy. I mean, right now in Barbados, you asked when we had the GI Act. We've had it many years. There's not a single registered GI, not one. And meanwhile, the developed world they laugh at us because, we're here we are buying from them. We go in a store here and buy a single malt Scotch whiskey. And the Scots have made sure that all the value of that is accrued back to Scotland. They have put in in their case, they have not only a GI, but it's also part of the law, where that single malt Scotch whiskey has to be bottled in Scotland, has to be aged in Scotland, has to use Scottish know-how, and we're buying that. But if I go to Scotland, I can buy a product that says Barbados on it, and none of those protections apply. We've got to get this right.
Still to come, Richard Seale says more about why we need a geographical indication for Barbados rum.
It was the UK High Court that ruled, I think, in 1913, that Demerara sugar did not need to come from Demerara.
One major argument against the geographical indication for Barbados rum is that it could stop those who buy our rum in bulk and bottle it abroad from putting additives into the rum to change its taste, and that this in turn could harm the potential growth of our rum market in the world. This is how Richard Seale sees it.
Producers like ourselves, our Mangay, are authentic producers. We don't engage in any nefarious practices of adding things to the rum to create illusions of value, because these tricks are as old as branding itself. One of the notorious tricks is to add some sugar, and you can do this, and nowhere on the label of the rum will it say sweetened or with added sugar. If I go and buy an orange juice, it will at least tell me whether there was some added sugar, and that's a great trick to make the product seem smooth. And I don't know how I could be creditable to sit and come to you and say, I need to sell more, so please allow me to do these nefarious tricks. I don't have the ability to do that. I hear that argument. I can't make it. And the other thing I would point to you is that the most successful categories are based on categories with the highest integrity. So again, I reference Scotch whisky, which is an industry that earns, I think it's about 4 or 5 billion directly and several more billion indirectly. And that is an industry where it is successful and people pay top dollar for the best single malts. People invest in them, and they do that based on the integrity of that industry. So I can see how an industry that allows nefarious practices to benefit individuals who exploit those practices. I can't see for the life of me how an industry based on allowing nefarious practices will benefit the industry as a whole. I can't see it. I can't do it. I can't make that argument. And I'm very, this is one of the things that we're very proud. I mean, our rums sell for several €100 a bottle. Our rums on the secondary market after they're released go for several €1,000. And they are based on the fact, on us, the integrity as us as a producer. If you destroy that, sure, you could sell lots of cheap, low-end product. But again, it comes back to Barbados. How is Barbados going to be successful? We're a high-cost environment. And in many ways, we should make no apology for that. We should make no apology for the fact that our labour costs are not at the level of Central America or other places in the world. So we're a high cost. So the route to our success is at the top end. The future for us is, whether it's the tourism at the very highest end, and with our export products, we've got to be on the artisanal end. We cannot compete on the mass-produced end. And again, you've got to remember that the multinational, who doesn't want these rules, these high, rules of integrity, is because at the end of the day, they can play with whoever they want to deal with. They can stop Barbados and switch to another territory. You got to remember, the multinational has no allegiance. And this, of course, is one of the amusing things I always find that we have in Barbados with successive governments. They always assume that every foreign entity that comes into Barbados is doing so for benevolent reasons. And we always know this is far from the truth.
According to the Barbados Statistical Service, in 2016, the value of rum exports from Barbados was approximately 45 million Barbados dollars. But by 2019, this increased by 33% to 60 million Barbados dollars. The United States accounts for about 70% of this country's rum exports, with Canada, the UK, and Germany as other significant export destinations. There are 4 distilleries in Barbados, and 3 of these are calling for the geographical indication for Barbados rum. There are St. Nicholas Abbey, established in 2006, the Mount Gay Distillery, and Foursquare Distillery, which was established in 1996.
For us at Foursquare, one of the things we've been working on more in the last couple of years is the Far East, because we're doing very well in the EU and the US, growing our business there, but we are in our infancy with the Far East. So we've been spending more time. When COVID ended, one of the first places I went out to was Singapore. So we're going to hub in Singapore for mostly Far East over there. So we're going to supply from there Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam, all out of Singapore. And then we had just had the Chinese ambassador visit, because we have begun direct shipments to China for China and Hong Kong. So we started in China, where we were shipping out of Europe, and now we've begun direct shipments. So these are markets where we're getting a lot of our attention now, because they're a little bit like where we were with the UK 20 years ago. It's early days. So yeah, the EU it's a large market, but I just use it as a very good example, because it's a large market, common market. It's very respectful of GIs, but there are obviously other territories that have GI legislation. The only country really that does not respect GIs is the United States. So all that would happen in the United States is that the only way we could protect our product in the United States is it would carry a logo saying Certified Geographical Indication. But there is nothing you could do really to stop exploitation of origins in the United States. I mean, we just if you saw the news recently, Gruyere cheese lost at the High Court. Protection that Gruyere cheese sold in America actually came from Gruyere, Switzerland. So Gruyere cheese in America can come from Wisconsin. And when I mention High Court, people forget that these things have been denied to us a very long time. This is not new. It was the UK High Court that ruled, I think, about 1913, that Demerara sugar did not need to come from Demerara. That Demerara was a generic word. So we have in the 20th century the development of intellectual property by the Europeans, with the denial of intellectual property in the colonial world. So they ruled that Demerara was generic. And Barbadians may be stunned to know you can go on certain shelves in the United States and see the word Barbados molasses. And he did not come from Barbados. And that is because the US has considered the word Barbados molasses as a generic term.
In the next edition,
Aged rum bottled in the island is a very large foreign exchange element.
this has been Barbados Rum, the case for a GI. I'm David Ellis.